Number 10. Sonic flight. Even with Sean Cassidy's accepted superhuman vocal stamina, this ability appears to be an odd one that doesn't really make a ton of sense. Banshee can produce a sonic scream, which he can use as a form of sonar, to injure those he fights with in battle and to shield himself or others, or disorient his enemies. Sure, that makes sense. But he also uses his sonic scream to fly, which would make sense if he were just using the ability to say, fly up to the second story of a building. But he has used this ability to fly longer distances as well, like over the ocean and stuff. However, in order to remain altitude and stay in the air, he has to keep screaming. So wait, how does he breathe? Well, we know he has enhanced vocal stamina, but this still doesn't really explain long trips. The answer is that he uses a winged gliding suit that allows him the time he needs to apparently breathe. However, without his winged gliding suit, his sonic flight powers would be pretty much useless. So yeah, kind of a weird ability. Number 9. Tentacles. Tentacles. Not to say that tentacles are inherently bad, by the way, they aren't, but what they are is kinda random, especially in this case. The tentacles I wanted to talk about here were Callisto's random tentacles. Callisto never really had tentacles until the early 2000s, but where did they come from? After all, she was introduced in the 1980s without them, and they just kinda seemed to appear one day. Mask was to blame for this alteration to Callisto's look, though she still had her famous eye patch at the time. She has never lost that, by the way. Mask gave Callisto tentacles to torment her. After he was defeated once more, she decided to actually keep them instead of be changed back. Not because they were useful, but because she refused to bargain with Mask anymore, so she just decided to accept them. She was like, I'm cool with these tentacles. The super weird thing is, although they were not a mutation of her own, they still disappeared along with her powers during the events of M-Day. Huh?
In at number 8, he can survive nuclear holocausts. In the one-shot comic book called Hulk: The End, we see Bruce Banner and the Hulk roaming a desolate version of the Earth that has suffered a war that ended due to a violent nuclear holocaust. Hulk and Banner are the last ones remaining alive, all thanks to the Hulk, who is invulnerable enough to survive the fallout. Banner and the Hulk actually despise each other though, and eventually Banner lets himself die, unable to live like that anymore. After Bruce passes on, the Hulk is trapped. If he ever turns back into Banner, he would die as well. It is all very tragic. But the reason why we take you to this depressing timeline is to discuss the fact that the Hulk's invulnerability and endurance allows for him to survive in such harsh environments, to outlive the effects of mass nuclear radiation. He actually grows stronger from more radiation, making exposure to deadly amounts of radiation a beneficial thing for him, although it does tend to drive him insane, but more on that later.
Number 7. Unlimited magics. I feel like people often forget that Ilyana Rasputin's real mutant power is teleportation. She's a teleporter. And yet we all get more wrapped up in her magical abilities, her soul sword. Magic actually only has such powerful magical abilities because she was kidnapped by Belasco when she was very little, which is pretty weird. Just because she was tied to Limbo through her teleportation powers, where Limbo is basically a stepping stone for her while teleporting, she now just has unlimited magical power? Huh? Also, that whole story of Belasco kidnapping young Ilyana, basically torturing her, and yet admiring and cherishing her as his protege all at the same time is just pretty odd and nonsensical to begin with. Number 6. Flaming prehensile tongue. Toad has all sorts of odd abilities, but one of the most bizarre and odd by far is his prehensile tongue. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but Amanda, he's Toad. Sticky prehensile tongue should make sense for any amphibian-based mutants. But what about when we decide to make it flaming? Yeah, I know, right? That's weird. That was an update that Toad's tongue saw in the comics. Why? I guess because it looks cool. But his tongue was already not a super useful power to have, and adding flames, it doesn't really make it any more useful. Does make it look cooler though, I guess.
You know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing happens to everything else.
Number 5. Eggs. There's a few occurrences of this with mutants. Angel Salvador has this ability due to her insect physiology. It doesn't really do much as a power for her, it's just part of the way that she reproduces. Though it is pretty creepy and a little gross. But then again, so is most stuff involving the creation of new life, am I right? One of the other now remarkably famous mutants who have had this weird ability? Goldballs, who now actually goes by the name Egg. He actually changed his code name due to the revelation regarding his powers. Originally Originally, we just thought gold balls emitted gold bouncy balls out of his body, which seemed pretty odd and well, kinda useless. But then we realized in the events of Dawn of X that these gold balls were actually infertile eggs, which is also kinda useless. Unless, that is, you have the other 4 insanely powerful members of the mutant group known as the Five around you. When matched up with Elixir, Tempest, Hope Summers, and Proteus, Egg's abilities revealed themselves as being mighty useful, as together the Five can combine their power sets in order to resurrect any of their fallen comrades. Still weird, but also kinda now amazing?
Number 4, Carnage. Speaking of Carnage. I mean, the longer a character's history, the greater the chance that things might get pretty out there for the character. Like when Carnage and Venom randomly displayed the ability to travel through the internet in the 90s. But one of the other crazier abilities we've seen is the ability for Carnage to control another person's mind. And I'm not just talking about the usual back and forth bonding here between symbiote and host, though I feel like Cletus and a symbiote, when we're talking about Carnage, are really a combo team. No one is really vying for control. The decisions they actually make together, and those decisions are both equal parts theirs. Whereas Venom has always said, "We are Venom," implying some independence between Brock and his symbiote, Carnage always refers to itself as one single entity, fully merged. I am Carnage. What I'm talking about here is what we've seen with Carnage both in Volume 1 and later in Volume 2, when it recovered these powers, exhibiting the ability to control or influence others' minds. It almost completely took control of Stark's mind and suit in Carnage Volume 1, Issue 5, which we've seen other symbiotes do this, but it's not a power you see very often. Where does it come from? Why does it exist? Because it comes from Null?
Number 3, hollow bones. Speaking of flight-related mutations, one common trait that you'll see presented as a power or a perk is hollow bones. Angel and Beak both have hollow bones. What it's supposed to help with in regards to those mutants is help them accomplish the ability to fly. And I mean, usually it does by making them significantly lighter, but also hollow bones sound like something terrible to have in the midst of a battle. Somehow Angel has been presented as being very durable, despite the fact that his hollow bones have to exist in order for his flight powers to work and make sense. But if his bones are hollow, then shouldn't punches from foes with super strength cripple the poor original X-Men team member? Like what?
My only regret is that I have bonitis.
Number 2, become ice cream. So far we've only seen this very specific mutant power once, and only in one single issue, and not even an issue of X-Men either, but instead Obnoxio, the clown's own series. One issue series. The mutant who possessed this ability? Ice Cream. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I know, a very original name. Ice Cream. Ice Cream used his abilities to infiltrate the X-Mansion, planning to put an end to the super team because their abilities made him feel ridiculous by comparison. I mean, I don't blame him. How he expected to accomplish this, however, with his power set being so useless, well, I have no idea. Number 1, Love Eyes. In all new Dupe, we gotta learn even more about Dupe's capabilities. Well, we don't really know what Dupe is still exactly. He has been a member of the X-Men, and hasn't been confirmed either way in regards to his mutant status, or, well, any other status for that matter. We don't know if he's an alien, or if he was made in a lab, or what's really going on with him. None of it's really fully been confirmed. What we do know is that he has a slew of insanely powerful and ridiculously cartoonish abilities. One such ability is Love Eyes, which seems to have no real specific purpose. Kitty Pryde suspected that he was using his love eyes to try and enchant her, casting a love spell on her, but Dupe claimed that they're just how he shows affection. Ineffective love spell or just a weird quirk. Either way, they're pretty irrational.
In at number 10, vampirism. Vampire Hulk? Yes, that's an actual thing. How the hell did that happen? Well, once upon a time on Earth 1610, Tony Stark's older brother created a clone of the Hulk who was much less interested in eating people and having fatal sexual intercourse with others. Fatal for them, not for him. He's kind of a horn dog and also super sexual assaulty. Yeah, he's a bad dude. That's the ultimate universe. Now this Hulk though is often referred to as Nerd Hulk, and while he is capable of maintaining his intellect, he's much weaker than the original 1610 Hulk thanks to him having control over his emotions, making him much less brutal and violent in combat. Which actually Captain America of this universe is like, that makes him crappier. he's less good. He was eventually rejected from the Ultimates and found himself visiting New York City, where he would be attacked by vampires, becoming one of them. Gotta love comics. He tried to bite and convert the Avengers, yet failed, and ended up taking over the group when he decided to undermine and kill their current leader. He ended up dying when exposed to sunlight, with Captain America letting him burn alive for a bit before ultimately decapitating him. Speaking of death, that brings us to our next number. In at number 9, he's undead. On Earth 9602, that is. So on that Earth, the Hulk is an undead creature. This is Skulk. He is the amalgamation of the Hulk and Solomon Grundy, and yes, he is undead. After an experiment with radiation went horribly wrong for Bruce Banner, he fused with the elemental entity of Solomon Grundy from the DC universe. This is the amalgam universe that we were talking about after all. This gave him the combined strength of the Hulk and all of the Hulk's abilities, along with Grundy's, whose exact nature of powers are unknown. Grundy himself is a reanimated corpse, mystically connected to the swamp where he died, and he was reborn. Every time he dies, that swamp gives him a new life, which must come in handy, but you're also an undead, like, reanimated living corpse, so I don't know if it's a good trade-off. Pretty good not being a corpse, although I've never been a corpse, so I wouldn't know if it's a bad thing. Just saying.
Number 8. Superpower manipulation. This is one that people can't seem to wrap their heads around because, well, it's just too overpowered, and why Hope Summers isn't utilized in the comics as often as someone of her power level could be, or maybe should be depending on your opinion. Superpower manipulation is a weird one because it basically isn't a power that has any inherent weaknesses attached to it. You can do whatever you need to with that power. The possibilities are pretty much endless. In giving Hope this power, they created something virtually undefeatable, but when we read comics, the struggle is what we usually most enjoy exploring and reading about. So from a writer and storyteller context, this makes Hope's power a hard one to feature and use in comics, which is why you might notice stories that involve her don't usually focus on her insane power set.
In at 7, he's a cannibal. Okay, sure, cannibalism is not a power. If anything, it's just a sickly scare tactic this Hulk uses in battle, but it is still a facet of the Ultimate Universe character that confuses some, so we've added it to our list. You can call it a power if you want, it's kinda weird if you do. Now for starters, the first time the Ultimate version of Bruce Banner transformed into the Hulk, it was a one-time thing. When he's later asked to work towards creating a new super soldier formula, he gets frustrated and ends up transforming himself when he injects himself with it to test. This transformation becomes permanent this time, and he would later confess that the honest-to-God truth of the matter was that he just missed being big. But this form has clearly impacted his psyche because he is a major He's such a threat that he needs to be locked up and is used as a weapon of last resort, with Cap getting the permission to traumatize Banner in order to get him to attack and act out against their enemies. He ends up eating a Chitauri agent, and in the Ultimate Wolverine vs. the Hulk issue 2, Hulk ends up devouring a bunch of co-workers on a farm after they make fun of Bruce Banner's decision to be vegan, along with questioning his sexuality, something that the Hulk seems to be very sensitive about in this universe. It triggers him into violence on multiple occasions. He even yells out "Hulk straight" at one point, so maybe he's a little gay. Moving on to number 6, Lizard Powers. On Earth 19919, we got to witness what the amalgamation of the Hulk and Spider-Man foe Lizard would look like. Known more commonly as Lizard Hulk, apt. This version of Bruce Banner has been infected with the spider virus in Spider Island issue 1 when the Spider Queen took over Manhattan. Lots of spiders. In order to rewrite the spider's DNA and remove the Spider Queen's control, Hulk and other heroes went under procedures to alter themselves. Now for Hulk, this was being injected by the Lizard's serum, which transformed him into the lizard-esque version of himself. It also gave him the abilities that Curtis Connors of Earth 616 has, including wall crawling, a faster regenerative healing factor, a tail that he can detach and then regrow, fangs and claws, and lastly, the ability to telepathically communicate and control forms of reptilian life within a 2-mile distance. Moving on to number 5, Venom Hulk. Once upon a time, the Venom symbiote bonded with the Hulk, upgrading Bruce Banner from regular Hulk to one with all of Venom's abilities. That's scary, guys. While we don't get to see the full range of what this terrifying character can do, it still manages to go on a rampage and be a massive threat to multiple heroes. For context, this occurred in a story titled "What if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man" in What If Volume 2 Issue 4. The hypothetical scenario in this one features Peter Parker not going to the Fantastic Four in time to have the symbiote removed from him, leading it to it hopping around possessing a bunch of Marvel heroes. It was a short-lived bond though. Venom would sense Thor's power after he had bonded with Hulk and then jump ship for the Asgardian instead. That's like kind of a diss. It's like I'd rather be in Thor.
In at number 4, magnetism. When looking at this Omega level mutant power, the first person who always comes to mind is of course Magneto. Although Magneto does so much more than just bending forks. Magneto has control over electromagnetism. This is one of the 4 fundamental forces of the universe. Magnetism though is one aspect of the combined electromagnetic force. It's the physical phenomena of objects either repelling or attracting. Human magnetism on the other hand, which is the main category to explain Magneto, is still an alleged ability in the real world. Most people who claim to be a human magnet also believe that their body can attract other materials. This claim, however, disrupts the explanation that they have a magnetism power and implies that there is a different kind of physical effect that's occurring.
Moving on to number 3, different emotions, different Hulks. Here's a power that actually hails from the 616 universe. Did you know that different Hulks can manifest inside of Bruce Banner's psyche, and that based on their core emotion that they derive from, can have different power levels and different influence over Banner and the Hulk? Case in point, Kul. I don't know, it's Hulk spelled backwards. K-L-U-H. Let's go with Kul on this one. Kul is the manifestation of Bruce Banner's sadness rather than rage. These manifestations are rooted in different emotions, and they're actually aspects of Hulk's personality and not Banner's, giving him less control over them. All things considered, that is pretty rotten luck. Kul has more power than the regular Hulk, and when Hulk is really sad, this guy comes out to play. He's significantly stronger, larger, and has a set of claws that would leave anyone shivering in their boots. In addition to that, we've also seen other iterations of Hulk's personality in the past, including Guilt Hulk and Devil Hulk, although Kul managed to be its own independent entity, existing outside of Banner and Hulk's mind. Correct me in those comments, friends, please. In at number 2, Unipower. Once upon a time, the Hulk became Captain Universe. Now, Captain Universe is a physical manifestation of something called the Unipower, which possesses an individual when there is a crisis, filling them with the power they need in order to put an end to said crisis, making that individual one of the strongest beings in the entire universe. Now, the power is absolutely immense. Multiple different characters in the Marvel Universe have been endowed with the Unipower in the past, including our pal Bruce Banner in the comic Captain Universe: The Incredible Hulk. Captain Universe uses the Hulk to try to restore its memory and find a scientist named Gilbert Wiles. Hulk wields this power temporarily, making him capable of things like energy manipulation, matter manipulation, energy projection, you name it. He's borderline omnipotent in this form. Speaking of being omnipotent, in at number 1, the power cosmic. Yeah, the Hulk had that once. The Hulk of Earth 2149 has been endowed with the power cosmic. Impressive, right? But not because he's some herald of Galactus's. No, he's actually a zombie, and came about getting that power upgrade by a kind of taboo means. Earth 2149 is the Marvel zombie universe. In it, everyone gets infected with a zombie virus and ends up eating one another, having an insatiable hunger. Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, is one of the worst of the worst. He, alongside other prominent zombified Marvel characters, end up devouring Galactus and Silver Surfer, and by eating them, they inherit the power cosmic. While one could argue that Galactus surely could take on a bunch of zombies, suspend your disbelief a little bit here. The Hulk becomes one of the zombie Galacti who ends up going around the galaxy in search of more food, pretty much obliterating all life in the process. All because he had a big old gigantic snack in the form of Galactus. Yikes.
Number 10, the Teen Tyrants. We're gonna start off with a variant of the team from another Earth. They're inspired by the Crime Syndicate, who are the evil version of the Justice League. So their team consists of Red Robin, Tempest, Arsenal, Red Raven, and Blackfire. What makes this slightly perplexing, especially to someone just jumping in, is except for one of these are all names that have been used either by the hero in question or someone in their universe. For example, Red Robin is often the alias of Tim Drake, but this Red Robin is an alternate evil Dick Grayson. Tempest is the name eventually taken on by Aqualad, just like Arsenal is for Roy Harper, and Blackfire in the main verse is Starfire's sister. They were clearer with their naming in the Crime Syndicate, where it was Ultraman, Superwoman, Owlman, etc. However, admittedly, a lot of the potential confusion is cleared up by the visuals, and the fact that the Titan team in question here is the one from the animated series, and not from the comics, so that helps. Number 9, Jesse Quick. Now for those of you who are watching the CW Flash show, you'll know of the existence of Jesse Quick, but what about her history with the Titans? Jesse Chambers first debuted in the Justice Society of America Volume 2 number 1 back in 1992. She's the daughter of two Golden Age heroes, Johnny Quick and Liberty Bell. Through some waffling about where to put her, she ended up on the 90s run of the Teen Titans, which was simply entitled Titans. At this point, she was a member of the team but also managed her father's company, Quick Start. Part of why she was recruited to the Titans was that they felt their personal squabbles had taken the team down before, and they wanted buffers. A question people often have about Jessie and her speed is how fast is she in relation to Wally, cause it would vary. Also, she was involved with her mom's boyfriend and that led to his death. It was a whole thing. She accessed her speed powers using what she called a mantra. She could visualize the speed formula, so she had to do this in order to access the speed force, which she was linked to. Because of her mom, she also has super strength, so a good power combo. Number 8, we have to take a look at a movie now. We've got Captain America, the really cheesy one from 1990. The movie that gave us a Steve Rogers who steals vans by pretending to be carsick. In this film, the Red Skull is really against the president's pro-environmental campaign and decides that really there's only one thing to do, and that's kidnap and brainwash him. This is instead of assassinating him, which was an option, but the kidnap brainwash plan is just so much more fun. The Red Skull needs a challenge. There's also nukes involved, but this brainwashing plot was the crux of it. This plan is weak, and if the Red Skull were real, I'm sure he'd sue for slander, cause he'd never come up with such a played out plan. At least not in the 90s. Maybe in the days of the Great Milk Price hike though. It was a joke, I know they're from different companies. Lower your pitchforks. Number 7. Wonder Girl, Cassandra Sandsmark, the second Wonder Girl even though she's the third to be called that name. She first debuted in Wonder Woman Volume 2 number 105 back in 1996. Unlike Donna Troy before her, she has a definitive and clear origin. She was Wonder Woman's sidekick and would go on to be a Teen Titan, have a thing with Superboy, at the time Con-El or Connor Kent, and then end up with Robin, Tim Drake, his best friend when they thought he was dead. So she gets her powers from mystic artifacts, such as the Gauntlet of Artemis, the Sandals of Hermes, which give her strength and flight. Also, fun fact, Zeus blessed Cassandra's mother to be able to take away her powers temporarily with a touch. Zeus believes in a good time out. This isn't random, she's Zeus's daughter. He's still taking up with the Earth ladies all these millennia later. Cassandra also has a lasso, but it's not a lasso of truth. She can also have her powers impacted by other members of the Greek pantheon, like Ares, who once took her powers because he felt she was being too frivolous. You have to be into Wonder Woman to get all the nuances of Cassandra, and since Rebirth she really hasn't been as prominent. She is now on the Titans of Tomorrow, because there were multiple Titans books running simultaneously. So now she's not in the present timeline, but it's fine. I mean, Connor only kinda sorta exists right now anyway. There's so much confusion with who is who and where they are. Number 6, Wally West 2. So Wally West 1, I guess, is the second Flash in the mainverse timeline, but the third if you include all continuity. He took over the mantle of the Flash after Barry Allen died in Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985. So then Wally went from being Kid Flash to Adult Flash. He was the Flash all the way up until the New 52, which was used as an opportunity to retcon him out of existence, cause DC head Dan Didio doesn't like him. And yet, there was still a Wally West. Meet Wallace West. He debuted in the Flash Annual number 3 back in 2014. He is introduced at first as the biracial, even though they rarely draw him that way at first, son of Iris's brother. Wally would end up joining the New 52 version of the Titans as Kid Flash, but fans never really took to him as they were salty and bitter about how Wally 1 was retconned. So they brought Wally 1 back in Rebirth. They're gonna call the second one Wally 2, I'm calling the first one Wally 1. Wally was brought back in Rebirth. It was a big event. Very moving. But now, what about Wally 2? It's not his fault he was poorly introduced and handled. Also, if he was retconned out of existence, there would be a thing on a whole other level. So he has been kept around as well, and in Rebirth has a new origin. He is now the son of Iris's other brother, Daniel West, who is the Reverse Flash, which is a cooler origin. Wally 2 is cool, he just needed to be introduced in a way that wasn't full on trying to replace the first Wally. Why did anyone think people would go with that? Who greenlit this? Number 5, Ravager. Okay, so there have been 5 DC characters named Ravager, but we're talking about Rose Wilson, Deathstroke's daughter. She first appeared in Deathstroke number 15 back in 1992. Ravager, pre-rebooted Origins, had a complicated relationship with her father to the point where she both idolized and hated him, and was modified with the same serum that enhanced him. However, the serum rendered her unstable, and she was prone to fits of psychotic rage. She even gouged her own eye out to be more like her father. She ends up on the Titans after befriending Nightwing, who Deathstroke had asked to train Rose after she had lost to Batgirl Cassandra Cain. This was after Dick's rape, so he was in a bad place and open to going to the dark side for a little bit. Rose would mellow out considerably post-Crisis. She would get her eye back and would sometimes babysit Leanne for Roy Harper, back when Roy Harper's daughter was still alive and existed. She's also been a member of Terror Titans, and since Rebirth she is around again, but not as prominent. And Nightwing trained her, but not because Slade asked him to, but because he wanted to.
Moving on to number 4, Super Teen. On one of our previous lists we mentioned Pureheart, the superhero version of Archie's comics namesake, Archie Andrews. He is a superhero who is pure of heart, if his name didn't give that away. And what exactly he is capable of is questionable at best. As long as he remains pure of heart, he has superpowers. You guys should probably go watch part 3 of this list if you're curious. Now for those of you who already have, at this number we have one of his companions, the superhero version of Betty Cooper, who comes to be when Betty twists her magical ponytail. Actually, her powers are supposed to be similar to Pureheart's, which, yes, just makes her more confusing. She has been described as a hero who can, I quote, do just about anything with her snappy looking costume and jet belt. So we know she can fly, we know she has super strength, we know that she is super durable, and we know her powers come to be when she witnesses someone's life in danger. For example, Archie about to get hit by a truck, Archie about to fall off a ledge, Archie about to hurt himself in pretty much any way possible, because apparently he is super klutzy. Or at least he is when Super Teen's around. But aside from that, she just tends to be a bit vague in her portrayals, hence her inclusion on this list. And just baffling conceptually in general. It's like Archie Comics is like, let's make our characters into superheroes. That's a great idea, and it just didn't really work out.
Number 3. Power Boy. Once again a hero that has shared their name with multiple others. We're talking about the third Power Boy. And yes, there is a Power Boy, and yes, he has a boob window. The third Power Boy debuted in Teen Titans Volume 3 number 38 back in 2006, and was on the team during the 1-year gap in Infinite Crisis. He had vague Supermanish powers. So Power Boy was supposed to be a male parody of female superhero cliches, down to his costume that had the boob window and had a lot of chest hair in it. I don't know, for me it never fully crystallized. I mean, a lot of heroes have ridiculous costumes, and as a fan of the boob window, that never really connected with me. He dated Supergirl for a bit and then got creepy and possessive, and she had to assault him to get him to leave her alone. Again, parody? If so, it's just poorly executed. Can somebody else have this costume? I'm kinda into it. Number 2. Kid Devil, aka Red Devil. Meet Eddie Bloomberg. He first appeared in Fury of Firestorm number 24 back in 1984. Since Infinite Crisis, he was trying to join the Teen Titans and would eventually get in after failing for psychological problems. So Kid Devil, he used to get his powers from his devil costume, and some of the things were fun, like bursting bubbles, night vision, etc. But then Infinite Crisis happened and he was retconned. Now he had a demonic appearance and abilities to match, these given to him by the demon lord Neuron. He can breathe fire, has super strength and stamina, can heal almost any wound, his blood is now gasoline, his very breath can burn, he can create portals of fire and travel through them. He's not around right now, he died sacrificing himself to save the Titans. See, he was a good addition to the team after all, as cannon fodder. Too soon? Kid Devil is a bit of a blink and you'll miss him character for a lot of people. He's not the Blue Devil, that's a different character. And number 1. Donna Troy. She made her first appearance in The Brave and the Bold number 60 in 1965, but the character of Wonder Girl had been around since 1961. This character had been created as a direct result of Frederick Wertham's novel Seduction of the Innocent, which posited all kinds of at the time salacious things about these heroes, and the Comics Code Authority wanted to combat this, especially because they were saying that children shouldn't read comics at all, and that was their market. Aside from Batman and Robin being coded as a homosexual couple, Wertham was afraid that Wonder Woman was a lesbian. He was really concerned about this, because she was a strong independent woman who didn't need no man. So the solution to this was to give Wonder Woman a family, including a Wonder Girl, because lesbians don't have families, I guess. And Wonder Girl was her little sister, but it was really just a younger version of herself who she partnered up with. However, this led to confusion, as when the Teen Titans started, she was mistaken for a regular character and not another version of Wonder Woman. They thought she was a sidekick. So she became an independent character by accident, and because of this her origin would forever be a convoluted mess, because at the start she didn't have one. There was even an entire plot years later surrounding this called Who is Donna Troy? On her origin, Marv Wolfman had this to say: I wrote the original Donna Troy origin story back in the first Titans run. She had never had one and was in fact not a real character. She was a computer simulation of Wonder Woman as a girl. That story also named her Donna Troy and set up everything that followed. Unfortunately, after Crisis on Infinite Earths and the Wonder Woman revamp, we had to go back and redo it again, as a brand new Wonder Woman being born on Earth could not have rescued the girl from the burning building. I wish we had been able to keep it, as I think it's gone insane now. I just wanted a simple origin story. I came up with the original, and then George Perez and I simply elaborated on what had been done, giving her real knowledge of who she was. I would love to say that everything after Who is Donna Troy should be forgotten, but that's not the way continuity works, sadly. I feel like that belongs in a t-shirt. That's not the way continuity works, just a sad crying face. She also had multiple power sets and different origins for said power sets. First, she was given powers by the Amazon's Purple Ray. Post-Crisis, she had powers that were identical to Diana's, but they were later enhanced, and she could command darkness and cold. In Rebirth, when Dick became Rick, Donna took over leading the Titans. That's the Cliff Notes version. Donna could have a whole video all her own. At one point, she was a magical duplicate made up of the memories of her from Wally West. That's Wally West 1.
Number 10. Null. While Null is more of the creator or father of all symbiotes, he's also kind of like the original symbiote in a way. As such, he has control over all symbiotes, sort of like his children, and he can manipulate them to do whatever he wants, which, sure, Null is all-powerful, but also still a pretty weird bit of history that we discovered as we learned more and more about the bizarre and gloriously strange story of Clintar. His abilities include allowing him to turn all of his symbiotes, all of Clintar, into a space dragon. Yep. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, just acknowledging how amazingly spacey and strange he is. He also managed to use his symbiotes to merge with the Silver Surfer for a brief moment, likely plotting to use the Silver Surfer as his very own symbiote herald. Oh man, Null definitely needs some symbiote heralds. That is a story I would read the heck out of. Number 9, Agony. Agony is the forced offspring of Venom, who was also modified by the Life Foundation. While Venom has been known to have somewhat acidic powers, Agony took this ability one bizarre step further, possessing the ability to spit acid harmful enough to actually melt human flesh. But it doesn't stop there. Agony also possesses the weird and unique ability to absorb substances and then reuse them itself, like Spider-Man's webbing.
In at number 8, Willful Transformation. The Hulk of Earth 928 has the ability to transform at will, which comes in handy. This Hulk, known as Hulk 2099, looks way more like a dinosaur than the traditional Hulk. With razor-sharp claws and fangs capable of tearing through steel, he's everything that the 616 Hulk is, but more vicious and more controlled. He was transformed by a gamma device used on him by the Knights of Banner cult, a group who worshipped the 20th century Hulk. This weapon of theirs was developed after they began experiments with gamma radiation in hopes of creating a new Hulk. And they got their wish when John Eisenhart, a movie studio exec, approached them in hopes of securing the rights to their story. When they said no, he reported their gamma experiments to authorities, who then slaughtered the cult, but then during the crossfire, he was hit by that gamma weapon and became the Hulk.
Number 7, Lasher. What's weird about this one is Lasher actually exhibits a less refined version of a power that the Venom symbiote attempted to exert earlier on. Okay, so I'm not going to lie, this one is just as interesting as it is strange in terms of symbiote history, which is kind of why I selfishly wanted to share it with you guys on this list. But it is additionally and also fairly outlandish and odd power, so it also belongs here as well. Lasher is a forced offspring of Venom, whose creation was manipulated by the government and the Life Foundation. Lasher's weird power as a result of that is that it can bond with 2 hosts, though one host needs to be less sentient or non-sentient in order for it to work. This is interesting because it is originally a power that Venom attempted to flex when it sought to bond with both Peter Parker and Eddie Brock at the same time. A symbiote threesome of sorts, you might say. However, it didn't work and caused Venom to pass out from exhaustion just for trying it. The other weird thing about this enhanced ability for Lasher is out of all of the things the government could work to improve, this seems like kind of a weird one to pick. All it grants the symbiote is additional control over a war dog ultimately, which is cool, but it doesn't seem like a huge advantage in comparison to, say, trying to cure one of its natural weaknesses, which would be better. Like, now it's not weak to fire or something like that. Number 6, Scorn. Scorn is the offspring of Carnage and Tanis Knives' prosthetic arm, because apparently that's a thing that can happen. As such, it has unique technological abilities, being part tech, part symbiote. It can fuse and interact with tech and seems to have a level of immunity when it comes to the usual sonic weaknesses that most symbiotes suffer from. What a weird symbiote, though. A weird origin. Number 5, Toxin. As its name implies, Toxin has the unique power of toxic fangs. While Venom itself seems to sometimes be able to produce acid, these toxic fangs and the toxic bite that it comes with seem to be a power that doesn't really come much from anywhere specific that makes sense. Symbiotes obviously possess their own power set due to their unique physiology, but when we were originally introduced to symbiotes, it was implied that unique abilities were actually cloned from those that they had bonded with previously, making Toxin's bite kind of an odd one, because where does it come from? But then again, many of the other symbiotes have also appeared to have unique abilities, so maybe this is just a thing and we just learned about it later, and so symbiotes can be born with, or I guess develop, unique abilities just all on their own? And you might be thinking, like, maybe it does come from one of Toxin's parents or Toxin's parent symbiote, but his parent symbiote was Carnage, so I don't know. What is that?
Number 4. Jericho. Now Jericho is set to appear in the, at the time of this recording, upcoming season 2 of Titans. Jericho is another of Deathstroke's children. He first appeared in Tales of the Teen Titans number 43 back in 1984. He was created so the team wouldn't consist entirely of characters with connections to pre-existing heroes. He is Slade's youngest son. He was rendered mute when Slade's mercenary life caught up with him and they came to try and kill him and his family. He saved his son, but not before his vocal cords were cut. So Jericho could possess someone by making eye contact. His body turns insubstantial and then he enters the host. He can then tap into all that person's abilities. However, the victim can still speak. He can't take over that part unless they're asleep. Jericho was a pacifist and genuinely good person until he got corrupted. Now Jericho isn't hard to understand, but he was largely forgotten for a time, which was a shame. His storylines were really good. Yay for him being acknowledged again.
Number 3. Sleeper. Another symbiote that possesses unusual chemical related powers is Sleeper. Sleeper is another offspring of Venom. It was left in the care of Alchemax by its parent, Venom, and their partner, Eddie Brock, who helped in a way to give birth to Sleeper, I guess you could say, making Eddie Brock, I guess, kinda like a parent to Sleeper too, although not genetically speaking per se. Even Alchemax was surprised when Sleeper seemed to develop all its own, a power of chemokinesis. It can create and secrete chemicals for a variety of purposes. It can use this ability to propel itself through space, manipulate the emotions of others, cloak its scent, control minds, and even to neutralize and attack enemies. Number 2. Anti-Venom. This is a pretty strange symbiote, even in just how it came to be. Anti-Venom is a symbiote that was created when Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, used his powers to cure Eddie Brock's cancer. But for some reason, his power bonded with the remnants of Venom that still lingered within Brock and created a new symbiote known as Anti-Venom. Being that this symbiote was created in such an odd way, some unique abilities made sense. It had been created after bonding with Eddie's white blood cells, so of course it had immense healing and cleansing powers. But it also for some reason had immunity to the usual weaknesses of a symbiote. It was immune to fire and sonic attacks for some reason, and this was never really fully explained, and just chalked up to it being an extremely different kind of symbiote. So there's still a lot that I feel like we didn't really figure out about Anti-Venom before it went poof, bye. Number 1. Venom. Venom has displayed countless abilities over the years and has changed as time has changed along with it. It has been revealed to be able to merge with inorganic material, giving us briefly a Venommobile for a bit when it was also bonded with a host at the same time. The Venom symbiote actually can seemingly bond to anything, including a dinosaur in the Old Man Logan universe. It's learned how to grow wings, has immunity to Ghost Rider's penance stare for some reason, maybe because it was once bonded with Ghost Rider, has access to a pocket dimension, can camouflage itself, and can travel through telephone lines and also travel through the internet. But one of the strangest powers was revealed during the time it spent with Flash Thompson as Agent Venom in outer space during the Space Knight series. At that point, it was revealed that after being cleansed, well, partially cleansed really, as it would later turn out, it could hear the voice of the universe, which gave it kind of like a galactic SOS radar, allowing Venom to sense when planets were in danger. Yeah, entire planets. Probably one of the most out there powers that we have seen it display. Spacey powers are always so weird and out there. They're great.
And at 10, he can create more Hulks. No, we are not talking about procreation here, friends. Hulk's blood has the ability to not only heal others, but to turn them into Hulk monsters as well. Case in point, Bruce Banner's cousin Jennifer Walters. Jennifer became She-Hulk after Bruce gave her a blood transfusion, something that neither had anticipated. She had been shot by an enemy of her father's, who is the LA County Sheriff, and luckily, Bruce was in town and had the same blood type as her. His radioactive blood mixed with her anger over the situation would transform her into She-Hulk, but her powers were a more reduced version of Bruce's, and she could eventually control her transformations too. Now the only hangup with this ability of the Hulks is that in order for it to successfully work, the other individual needs to have DNA that is a close match to Bruce Banner's, meaning it's only really going to work for relatives, but still cool nonetheless. Up next at 9, Power Source. The Hulk's body is always creating and radiating gamma energy, which makes him like a walking gamma battery, as noted in the Incredible Hulk issue 103 from Volume 1. Now on several occasions, the radiation within the Hulk's body has been used as an energy source. While that sounds really neat, it can also cause devastating effects, so maybe think twice about asking him to help you charge your phone. In World War Hulk, this occurred when Hulk got so angry that he nearly smashed the planet to smithereens, and in the process, because of how how pissed off he was, his body began to emit radiation. Conrad Zaxxon once tried to use the Hulk as a battery for weapons that he wanted to take over the Earth with. Now the Hulk can force feed large amounts of this gamma radiation to overload machines, or to drain enemies of their own gamma radiation, like he did to the second Red Hulk. The exact extent of how much radiation the Hulk can control at any given time has yet to be determined.
In at number 8, energy manipulation. This is the ability to manipulate energy from one form into another. Some magicians have used this phenomenon of energy manipulation to make blindfolded people believe the magician is touching a portion of their body, and by directing them to focus their attention on the body, the end result has been astounding.
If you felt a touch, please raise your right hand.
We do understand energy manipulation to some extent in regards to electricity. We know that this energy can be distributed and transformed into everything around us. However, in terms of phenomenons like the way that Omega level mutants manipulate energy, it's something that cannot be observed, tested, or measured in any way, meaning it is virtually impossible for science to explain how it would work.
And at 7, regeneration. Hulk has the ability to grow new tissue at an exceptionally fast rate, and to regenerate older tissue. He has had one of the fastest regenerative healing factors in the entire Marvel universe, having demonstrated that if he concentrates hard enough, he can grow back parts of his body, like layers and layers of skin in a matter of seconds. Now this can occasionally cause some problems for him. When he fought against Speed Freak, the villain hit him with metal barbs, and the Hulk's skin grew over the barbs, causing it to tear again after the regrowth. It's gotta hurt. Then, in Hulk the End, he was able to regenerate parts of his body that radioactive cockroaches consumed, which also doesn't sound fun. Plus the angrier he gets, the faster he can regenerate, so kind of a nifty ability to have. And at number 6, resurrection. In Civil War II, the Inhuman Ulysses has a vision of the Hulk killing all of the Avengers. When Bruce Banner, the Hulk's former alter ego, is approached about the situation, he's confronted by members of the Avengers, and Hawkeye in the process kills Banner. But shortly after Civil War II ended, the Hulk had resurrected Banner, as seen in Avengers No Surrender. The comic depicts a whole sequence of all of the times Banner and the Hulk have faced death, intercut with the image of a doorway opening, implying that's how Banner's mind returns after the Hulk's body regenerates once he's been killed off. Does that mean, like, even of old age he'll never really truly die? Or does his mind have to still be, you know, functional and wanting to live? It's a curious question. Moving on to 5, adaptability. The Hulk is one of the most adaptable heroes in comic books. Now because of the speed in which he regenerates tissue, he's able to survive some of the harsher climates, like pressure underwater or the vacuum of outer space. But here is the fun part. He has a gland in his body that creates oxygen to fill his lungs, so when he's underwater or when he's in space, he can function without fear of losing air. His body is also built to sustain extreme amounts of pressure, hence why he's able to walk along the bottom of the ocean, which is a thing he did once. Said need a lot in this video.
Number 4. Lex makes a robotic Lois Lane. So Lex is obsessed with Clark on many levels, some that he probably doesn't want to admit to himself, and he's always scheming something. Remember when Connor Kent, aka Connell, was Lex and Clark's son before they retconned that? Well, I will always remember. The New 52? What's that? So in Action Comics number 890, we learned that Lex's assistant had made a Lois Lane robot, and while Lex was like, okay thanks, I'll keep it. And he did, and he slept with her. It's just weird. This is just bizarre villainous behavior. It happened while plotting really, but you need to know. I mean, he's creating clones of him and Clark's DNA. He's sleeping with a Lois Lane bot. There are things that need to be discussed here that probably never will be. All I'm gonna say is, Klex.
And at 3, honing in on New Mexico. While that might sound like a very strange ability, it's one that makes perfect sense for the Hulk. So, the Hulk is capable of honing in on the place of his superpower origin. This is something we learned about thanks to the Hulk of Future Imperfect, Maestro, a future timeline version of the big green monster who had survived a nuclear war and became a tyrant overlord of sorts, dominating over the planet, collecting trophies of other dead superheroes and villains. He was also completely insane by this point thanks to the extreme amounts of radiation he was absorbing. Anywho, when the Hulk defeats Maestro, he does it by leading him back in time so that he's destroyed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk. Therefore, homing in on this spot in New Mexico is because of Maestro's spirit calling out to him. This also ties into 2 other supernatural abilities, so let's move on to those. In at 2, he can see ghosts. So that whole ability to home in on his origin spot in New Mexico, how Maestro's spirit had called out to him since it's the place where he died, well, this is kind of tied to this too, and his ability to see ghosts. Now this was actually a latent ability of the Hulk's, which first appeared after he accidentally killed his father, whose ghost then haunted him for a while. There's been a bit of a debate as to how exactly the Hulk can see ghosts, hence the confusion surrounding this power. But one answer comes in the form of our next number, and our final number, in at 1, astral sight. The Hulk can see individuals on the astral plane. Now this was first explored in the Defenders when the Hulk interacted with Doctor Strange, who was astral projecting at the time. Others could not perceive Strange's astral form, only Hulk could. While some have linked this ability to Maestro, a more plausible theory has arisen in the form of this ability of the Hulk's being a convenient plot point, which, I mean, yeah. Now, in order to help bring the members of that iteration of Defenders together in a way that made sense, certain editorial choices were made, including having the Hulk be able to see Doctor Strange. But in the story world though, Doctor Strange would speculate that it was a power derivative of some sort of primitive or animalistic aspect of the Hulk's mind, that he could sense a fundamental wrongness in the environment around him, although there wasn't much further elaboration on it. Now, others chalk this up to the fact that he has a heightened sense of perception, and how that allows him to hunt and fight off characters the likes of the Wendigo. Plausible theories. I kinda like the last one. In at number 10, Danielle Moonstar. Danielle Moonstar is a confusing character, period. She's an individual who has been through multiple iterations of aliases, to the point where it's almost comical. Danielle Danny Moonstar first appeared in the New Mutants in 1982, and is a Cheyenne superhero who is generally associated with the X-Men. She was initially codenamed Psyche and later became Mirage, and her abilities history is a long one. Let's start with her mutant powers. She was a former empath who lost her abilities to communicate with animals and create three-dimensional images of visual concept within her mind and the minds of others. Like I said, she lost that. Generally, she could manifest people's fears or desires as realistic illusions. She lost those powers on M-Day and then regained them after being infected with the transmutant virus, but then was also cured of it by Dark Beast. See what I mean? It's already confusing. She briefly could make telepathic images manifest as psionic energy, allowing them to become tangible entities of solid psionic force, but that was limited. She would carry around a dream spear with her to destroy them when she was done with them. Unfortunately though, these powers would give her blinding headaches. Then, she became a Valkyrie, and was endowed with the Valkyrie power to perceive death. She would lose those powers though when Asgard fell, but then made a deal with Hela to get them back. And, in the past, she was capable of manipulating quantum energy. Moving on to number 9, Black Hood. When you hear the name Black Hood, a couple of different things may pop into your mind. For starters, it's a name that likely elicits a pulp character, mysterious and criminal perhaps in nature, a vigilante maybe. Now for those of you immersed in pop culture sensations, you might think of the CW TV series Riverdale and its mildly absurd Black Hood serial killer storyline. If you don't watch Riverdale, yes, that's a thing. Well, the Black Hood comic character actually has relations to that latter association, since he was a creation of Archie Comics. First appearing in Top Notch Comics issue 9 in 1940, he became rather popular, getting his own title called Black Hood Comics in 1943, which was a pulp magazine that ran for 11 issues before it was retitled and shifted its focus to being an all-humor title. During his time under Archie Comics, he was merely a great fighter and detective, but after the character was revived by DC's Impact Comics imprint in 1991, he gained a different set of powers, magically increased physical abilities and awareness. So what does that even mean? Well, we'll get to that in a sec, because here's where it gets even more befuddling. Impact had 3 Black Hoods. The first was a bitter vigilante who was killed off in their first issue of Black Hood. The second was a high school student who took over the hood but then abandoned it. And then the third was a former mobster who killed the first Black Hood. Whenever somebody wore the hood, they would get heightened awareness and increased strength, speed, and agility. The real kicker though? The hood was believed to be cursed, with each individual who wore it eventually succumbing to death, and the hood finding its way into the hands of a new individual who had the potential to take up the helm.
Number 8, Osiris. There have been 3 Osirises, and for our purposes we need the third, Amon Tomaz. He was briefly a member between Infinite Crisis and 1 year later. Big DC reset events, cause nothing shakes up the roster of a team like a giant event. So he is the brother of the hero Isis, who during this period would marry Black Adam, who was on a heroic bend briefly, kinda sorta. Osiris joined the Titans cause he wanted friends. You know, save the world, go out for burgers, it's like a club really, but sometimes members die, and he was one of them. He was granted his powers by Black Adam, and so to become Osiris, he must say his name, which must have a double effect on people. They must panic and think Black Adam is about to show up to defend his brother-in-law. One question people have about his powers is whether or not he has access to all of Adam's powers when he is not there, or is it just still a small portion of them, which is the usual Shazam fare, but coming from Egyptian gods, so Shu, Heru, Amon, Zehutu, Aten, and Mehen. If I mispronounced any of those, I'm sorry, but I'm sure some of you will yell at me anyway.
And at 7, Jazz. If you thought Thunderer was a character who had a silly power, get ready to wrap your mind around Jazz. No, not the music, but the character. Jazz, whose real name is John Xander, is a blue-skinned mutant who wanted to be a rapper, but was not good at it. He became a drug runner instead, selling toad juice, which was a drug made from the secretions of another mutant. Gross. After M-Day, he was one of the few who retained his powers, and later, while trying to buy drugs, he was killed by Johnny D via a miniature voodoo doll. Needless to say, dude has a bit of a mockable storyline. So why is he confusing? Because he's a low-level mutant who doesn't actually have an ability. His mutation is that his skin is blue. That's it. I mean, maybe he could rap you to death with his mediocrity, but technically that is not a superpower. That's just a depressing character trait. And at 6, Kylun. There are plenty of animal-themed superheroes out there in the world of comics. Generally, their powers derive from their animal persona, as if they were some sort of anthropomorphic creature who had the abilities of said creature. We're not talking furries here, friends. Don't you dare make that joke in the comments. For example, take a look at Beast. Even Wolverine has similarities to his alias's namesake. But then there is Kylun, who is slightly misleading. Sure, he looks like a cat creature of sorts, feline in nature, but that has no relation to his abilities. He's got claws and fangs which he can use in battle, but his true power is something unrelated. He can mimic sounds. Literally any sound that he hears, Kylun, aka Colin McKay, can replicate it thanks to his superpowered vocal cords. You weren't expecting that, were you? And at 5, Metamorpho. Metamorpho is a head scratcher. Also known as the Element Man, Metamorpho is a DC character who helped found the Outsiders, and first appeared in 1965 in The Brave and the Bold issue 57. He was a product of the popularity of Fantastic Powers, a successor to Doom Patrol and Metal Men, and his abilities consisted of elemental shapeshifting, super strength, and invulnerability. While those last two are pretty straightforward, it's the shapeshifting that we're concerned with. When you think elemental, you think fire, earth, water, air, right? Well, Metamorpho is more complex than that, which often causes confusion surrounding the character. He can transmute his body into a variety of elemental compounds that he can then form to his will. In other words, he is a much more science-based hero. Now initially, he was restricted to elements that naturally occur within the human body, but over time that became less and less of a limitation, with writers allowing him to assume forms of gas, liquids, or solid states. He can alter the shapes and consistencies of these elements to form complex compounds, and can shape parts and portions of his body rather than being forced to change it in its entirety. He is capable of forming himself into complex structures the likes of tanks and a bicycle, or more ambiguous stuff like a cloud. And at number 4, demonic abilities. Want demon powers? Just shack up in hell for a while and bam, you'll become orange and capable of all sorts of terrible things. Or at least that's what Infernal Hulk has taught us. Hailing from Earth 11638, Infernal Hulk has a fascinating story. Upon first glance, he is just the Hulk merged with the demon, and while that's not wrong, there's more to it than that. Bruce Banner of Earth 11638 is the Sorcerer Supreme. He casts a spell in which his Hulk half is separated from him and banished to the depths of hell, but it backfires because the Hulk goes down into hell and becomes more demonic, corrupted by the demons he encounters, gaining some of their powers and also turning orange, as one does in hell. He finds his way back up to Earth and wreaks havoc, with Bruce ultimately having to remerge them and then banish himself to hell with the Hulk in order to keep humanity safe. And at 3, Extrano. Extrano is a character who didn't receive the best of treatment in his early years. A DC character, Extrano first appeared in Millennium issue 2 in 1988 and is a superhero magician, although many might remember him for what he's generally mocked for. A magical gay character who was attacked by an AIDS vampire called Hemogoblin that then made him HIV positive. You can't make this up. Needless to say, the portrayal was not a great one, especially for the queer community in a time when there was plenty of misconceptions about AIDS. He was a character who was selected by the Guardians of the Universe to take part in an experiment in human evolution, which made him into a powerful magician, whose sorcery abilities were never really fully elaborated upon. He would dress in loose, colorful garments, refer to himself as Auntie, and was pretty much coded as a homosexual character, who later would acquire a powerful skull crystal that made him more masculine, which was largely believed to be the result of negative comments from readers. His magic consisted of stage tricks, using ping pong balls to outwit his foes. He could levitate and fire blasts of energy from his hands, but not much of what he could do was explained in great detail. He was very much the token magician character. Now these days he's gotten a bit more of a makeover, although his abilities are still quite ambiguous. He appeared in DC Rebirth, working with Midnighter to locate Apollo's soul in hell. According to writer Steve Orlando, who himself is bisexual, I quote, "With a book like Midnighter and Apollo, which from cover to cover is a love letter to queer characters and our struggle to live, be visible and loved, it felt right to return one of the first and reintroduce him to a new generation." Maybe there's hope for Extrano after all. Up next at 2, Doorman. Doorman, aka Damar Davis, is a Marvel character who first appeared in West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 46 in 1989, and was a member of the Great Lakes Avengers. He responded to Mr. Immortal's ad for Heroes for the Great Lakes team, who, on paper, can generate portals, and and can fly via skis, which yes is weird. He is intangible and can also bring souls to the afterlife. It's a confusing set of skills, right? But here's where it gets more perplexing. His portal ability has a restriction. He can teleport people through walls, with his body serving as that portal, hence the name Doorman. Concerning the skis, he can summon them at will, although that doesn't make them any less confusing. If anything, his most useful talent is delivering souls to oblivion, but even then, he can only do it if that person is deceased, and he becomes only visible to that soul. It's like his creators didn't really think the portal ability was enough, so they decided to use the more mythical version of the Doorman or Gatekeeper and make him all about death, which for the record was a power of his added after the fact. And finally, in at number 1, Rainbow Girl. Ending off our list with an inherently sexist creation, we have Rainbow Girl. Rainbow Girl is an extraterrestrial character who first appeared in 1963 in DC's Adventure Comics issue 309. She is a metahuman who wields the power of the mysterious emotional spectrum, resulting in unpredictable mood swings. You can't make this up. It's like my mantra for this whole series. She would tap into colors that would result in different moods. Red being anger, blue being hope, green being willpower. She once also exhibited the ability to create a pheromone field that surrounded her in a giant rainbow and gave her an irresistible personality. Ugh. But here's where it gets utterly fascinating. Even DC doesn't know what the hell she can do. According to Jeff Johns, during the Blackest Night event, he noted that Rainbow Girl doesn't fully understand her powers and uses them more for fun. Just kill me now.
In at number 10, telekinesis. This is a common power thrown around in the world of superheroes, but can you imagine if it actually existed? Being able to move objects with your mind has long been a topic of discussion by scientists, and there's even been odd anomalies of real life people explaining that they can actually do this. Evidence for how and why though is very sparse. Telekinesis defies the laws of physics, so for it to exist in our world on the level that it does for an Omega mutant would impact everything we believe about science. The idea of telekinesis being possible is something we can't even comprehend. Some in the psychic community have brought up that paranormal events of people seeing ghosts move things around could actually be the manifestations of our own spiritual energy being unconsciously released on it. However, even the concept that we have spirits is still a heavily divisive topic in the scientific community. In at number 9, telepathy. This concept of power that we often see mutants using is another human discussion about the possibility of it existing in our reality. What's really baffling about this mutant Omega level power is that it's never been a topic of discussion until the 20th century. We hear occasionally about stories of people being able to read minds, and many mentalists sell the idea that they have harnessed this ability, but in reality science denies its existence. It's defined as the transmission of thoughts over some distance without the use of any kind of technology. It is a kind of wireless communication between two human brains. Again though, scientists hark back to the laws of physics as to why its existence wouldn't make sense. The ability of telepathy isn't plausible because no section of the brain is positioned to act as a receptor for long distance communication without the use of technology.
Number 8. Magic Venom. This whole thing doesn't make a ton of sense to me, to be honest, though the abilities I guess can be explained away by being connected to magic? During the War of the Realms, Eddie Brock got to create his own version of Venom when he was gifted a Dreamstone by a dark elf witch. After he accepted it, the witch revealed that Eddie would now have to serve and fight for her ruler Malekith. Haha, gotcha. But of course, Eddie didn't want to, so instead, he chomped off one of her arms. That whole interaction was pretty weird, because, I mean, obviously, he's just gonna bite off one of your arms. What do you think was gonna happen, witch? And Eddie then used the Dreamstone, which can make your dreams come true, to create a new version of a magic Venom suit, which was also pretty strange. This version of Venom came with no voice of its own, but for some reason seemed to amplify Eddie's negative emotions. As such, Eddie decided to split up the magical symbiote, having the power to do so, transforming it into Asgardian armor for the civilians that he saved. Already a pretty weird ability. He could also control weather with the symbiote, because I guess dreams and magic?
In at number 7, weather manipulation. Weather manipulation is often referred to as weather modification, and the only way that we can understand it is by seeing a plane seed clouds to increase rain or snow. However, in terms of the way that, say, Storm can use her mind to manipulate the weather into whatever conditions that she wants, is very confusing and something we will never be able to understand as humans. In at number 6, power manifestation. This is the Omega power that Legion Legion, the child of Professor X and Gabrielle, seems to have inherited. Not only did Legion take on his dad's telepathic gifts, but his dissociative identity disorder allowed for multiple personalities to each manifest its own powers. The very concept though of being able to use mind over matter to manifest power is very woo-woo subject matter in the science realm. In fact, true supernatural powers being manifested into a human has never been proven, and most obscure cases of moments of super strength, say, are attributed to a spike in adrenaline rather than a power that you've always had deep down and just haven't found a way to harness. In at number 5, matter manipulation. This is the ability to manipulate the particles that make up the matter and bonds between them. In 1990, IBM engineers manipulated atoms using a scanning tunneling microscope. They arranged atoms on a metal surface to spell IBM. This is interesting that we were able to manipulate matter, but again it was through the use of technology, so it's no wonder that this method could be explained. What could never be explained is a single individual being able to change the particle structure of an object using their mind. It is truly a science fiction mutant power.
Number 4, aviation. The power of aviation through non-telekinetic means, that is. Most mutants that can naturally fly usually have this power as a result of a physical mutation. Some are simply granted wings, like Angel or Pixie, who otherwise find themselves looking like a standard human exteriorly, but some find themselves with a full-on bird-like mutation, like Beak. Beak's aviation mutation, depending on the artist, can leave him looking pretty all-out freaky. He's either drawn like a full-on bird person, or sometimes like a hybrid bird-human. His aviation mutation barely even gives him flight abilities as well. He isn't great at flying, but he can manage to do it for very short distances if he really tries. So why does he look like a bird then? It's not really useful.
In at number 3, reality manipulation. So many of these powers are impossible for us to understand because of all of these scientific laws that we have in place to understand our reality. So reality manipulation would certainly throw everything we know out the window. When an Omega level mutant uses reality manipulation, it is a very powerful force. It gives them free reign to break the laws of physics and invent their own, which then is imposed on everyone living in said reality. We have altered our reality on a physical level if you consider the industrial age that saw humans building machines and cities to change the reality of everything from war to travel to how we live our everyday lives. On the level of breaking the laws of physics though, that becomes much more confusing to comprehend. In at number 2, temperature manipulation. Bobby Drake, or Iceman, is one of the OG X-Men that can manipulate his own body temperatures to create ice and even enclose his body within it. A state of being that, if possible in the real world, 1, could not be explained, and 2, would surely kill anyone who attempted it. We manipulate our home's temperatures with devices like the air conditioner or a furnace for heat, but to change our own temperature at a moment's notice would be much harder for science to explain. I mean, you can adjust your body's internal temperature, but if your core temperature dropped even by 2 degrees, your brain would just shut down from the hypothermia. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, biokinesis. This is the ability to control and change one's genes by simply using the psychic powers of the mind. Omega level mutants such as Elixir have exhibited this in the past, showing off the ability to change the pigmentation of his skin. The difference between this Omega mutant and us though is that Elixir has complete control over his own organic structure and even those closest to him. He has really put this power to the test, displaying the potential for him to be able to bring people back from the dead even. In reality though, there is no explanation for people who claim they've changed their eye color by using this psychic ability. In most cases, these folks are clickbaiting the internet into believing it's possible if you just believe. Science, on the other hand, says otherwise.
Number 10. Nazis raise milk prices. This comes to us from 1942, so get ready, full steam propaganda ahead. All the heroes who were around at this time period were fighting Nazis, and Wonder Woman was no exception. But they still wanted there to be comic book plots, like this one from Sensation Comics number 7. In this tale, Diana notices that the price of milk is soaring, and she's on the case. She goes to speak to the head of International Milk Co., but he's dismissive. Long story short, they're secret Nazis, and they're raising the price of milk to make it inaccessible for American youth, so that they will have weak, brittle bones and not be able to fight. Playing the long game. They also try to drown her in milk, but she changes in the milk, escapes, and ultimately ensures the safety of good affordable milk prices. That's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking you could expect from the Golden Age villains. Kept you on your toes. Number 9. Ra's al Ghul pretends to be Talia to get Bruce Wayne's body. This is going to take us over to Batman Beyond, and is largely on here because I want to talk about this show and this fantastic episode. This plot comes to us from the episode Out of the Past, and deals with Bruce's sadness about aging and how he feels the best years of his life and his great loves are behind him. When lo and behold, Talia appears, offering him the chance to rejuvenate in the Lazarus Pit, thusly leaving Gotham to Terry and come and finally live their life together. Also, this is all pre-Damian, so she hasn't raped him in this continuity. That's how Damian was conceived. Fast facts. Bruce starts to take her up on it, but as you can imagine, it's too good to be true. And after sharing a kiss, and maybe more, it's revealed that Talia isn't Talia at all. It's Ra's, who has overwritten Talia, taking control of her body. This is all part of a long quest because he wants Bruce's body to rejuvenate it, transfer his consciousness into it, and pretend to be his long-lost heir, continuing his plans with Bruce Wayne's resources. Here's the thing, he didn't have to do this with Bruce. He could have picked any old rich Joe Schmo with no legitimate heirs and tempted them with youth. This was just creepy, and leads me to wonder about his true feelings for Bruce. Great episode, good series, watch it, that is all. And look, I didn't go off on my usual DCAU tangent, which this series is a part of.
Moving on to 8, The Thunderer. The Thunderer is a character who was published by Timely Comics in the Golden Age, the predecessor of Marvel. He's a dude whose superpower was high impact voice amplification. In other words, dude shouted real loud. So let's backtrack here for a sec. Thunderer first appeared in 1941 in Daring Mystery Comics issue 7, and was a fellow named Jerry Carstairs, a radio operator frustrated that the US wasn't dealing with crime or Nazi saboteurs, so he took the law into his own hands. After learning of a Nazi infiltration operation that was abusing the radio station he worked at, he adopted the Thunderer persona, a costume with a built-in microphone, and took them down. He is capable of deafening people or leveling buildings with his sonic scream. Sure, you could call him a predecessor to Black Bolt's perhaps, on a creative level, but let's be real here. How exactly he was able to create a built-in microphone to do that in the 40s and level buildings is beyond me. Needless to say, he fell into obscurity, with one of his only claims to fame now being that he appeared in an animated Spider-Man series in an episode called 6 Forgotten Warriors. At least his costume looked kinda cool though, you gotta give him that.
Number 7, last movie for now I promise. Then we're on to the full comic book zaniness, but we have to talk about Catwoman, the Halle Berry one. People often get caught up in the Halle Berry as Catwoman, or the terrible CG, or the costume trying so hard to be sexy it does a 180 and just becomes sad. But what is often skipped over is the plot. So this film involves an evil cosmetics company whose product will eventually destroy the faces of the women who use it, while also hardening them into stone. This is actually a classic storyline, we've been here before. However, when you make it the focal point of a 2004 movie, people start to poke holes in it. Lauren Hadare, played by Sharon Stone, is the wife of the CEO of the beauty company, and she has become obsessed. She kills patients. Halle Berry is not playing Selena Kyle in this movie. She kills her own husband and goes to great lengths to keep this a secret. They need to release this product and keep it going. However, here's the thing, this is an untenable plan. People are going to use this product and then the word will get out. Are you going to kill every single person who uses it? No. So essentially the fight is Catwoman trying to stop people from having to file a civil suit. A class action lawsuit actually. This movie is actually really fun if you accept it on its own terms. It's not good, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good time. Number 6. Scarecrow makes everyone illiterate. So the DCAU, that being the DC Animated Universe, had a series of tie-in Batman comics, 2 series actually, and this plot comes from those pages. And it takes the heroes a while to figure out that it's actually a Scarecrow plot, because in all fairness, it doesn't match his usual MO, at least not until you really think about it. So in this story, nobody can read anything anymore. They can't read signs, books, nothing, and society just instantly collapses. Train conductors can't run trains, people can't follow road signs, pandemonium. The thing with this plan is that it takes a very loose look at illiteracy, like people can't understand symbols of any kind or things that were color coded. Nothing. It's just a bit of a stretch. They can't even take money out of an ATM. All they're seeing is bizarre symbols. People are dying. They call it the illiteracy disease. This story was 2 parts. On the second cover it has Robin cowering in fear of road signs. The thing with this one is, well, it's just not accurately labeled. It makes for a fun story, but you really have to suspend your disbelief, which I am 100% willing to do. Way to go outside the box, Scarecrow. That's good thinking. Number 5. Identity Crisis. Identity Crisis is one of those stories that was really well received when it was released, but people now look back on it with a bit of a jaded eye. Identity Crisis was released from June to December of 2004, and was written by famed thriller novelist Brad Meltzer, who wanted to create a thriller in the superhero format. The ramifications it had on characters and some of the mischaracterizations are still discussed to this day, but paradoxically, it was very solidly written. It just really needs to be taken on its own in a bubble, which thanks to 2 universe-wide shifts since one can now do. So the villainess of this tale was Jean Loring, the former wife of the Atom, Ray Palmer, who set about terrorizing the loved ones of heroes so that she and the Atom would get back together because he'd be concerned about her safety. The only thing is, right out the gate, she accidentally killed the elongated man's wife, and then it was just a case of escalation. Let me kill my friend so that my ex will get back with me. Or, you know, I could call him. This is why she ended up in Arkham, which was also a terrible idea. She knew identities, but Ray put her there anyway. Maybe they truly were meant to be.
And at 4, punching through time. I love a good punch through time number. The Hulk is proven capable of punching his way through temporal and spatial dimensions. Weird, right? The science behind this one is a little bit sketchy if we're being honest, and so why it finds a place on this list. Now, in the Incredible Hulk issue 135, the character came up against Kang the Conqueror and followed him through the time stream and started punching through it so hard that he made it through to the past. In issue 304, he would be banished to another dimension and encountered old foes, the UFOs, which is their name, and punched Ironclad so hard that it would shake the entire multiverse. He also once tore the fabric of reality by using his thunderclap, or rather a sonic clap, which used sound waves that discharged enough of a burst that they could rip apart the very seams of reality, as seen in Incredible Hulk issue 126. He's so strong that he can f with your reality, essentially, so maybe don't piss off the Hulk ever. I mean, you wouldn't want to, because you'd probably like you anyway, so.
Number 3. Dr. Doom vs. Office Supplies. This comic is from 2006, and its full title is Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four in Brain Drain, Teachers Count / Office Max Custom Comic number 1. This comic features Dr. Doom trying to drain the intelligence out of the children of the world. But really what this story is about is being sponsored by Office Max and featuring some actual teachers. This is a PSA comic, so a public service announcement. Its message is that teachers need to be paid more. How it delivers that message, well, basically it's trying to talk about how they have to contend with real world issues like having to buy their own office supplies, but then goes, thankfully there's Office Max, so they're super affordable, hint hint. And also they take on ignorance, such as Dr. Doom's brain drain machine. This comic does have some stellar moments though, such as the teachers throwing office supplies at Doom, and also Reed being impressed by the Office Max supply store. He's actually like, wow, look at all these supplies, rubber bands and a ball. Reed is impressed by many things, but a ball of rubber bands? Okay, sure Jan. Number 2. Magneto was Zorn all along. This arc and the retcon that had to be done afterwards are still confusing to people. So Zorn debuted in the new X-Men Annual number 1, and he existed, like he was real, only at some point he was replaced by Magneto, and no one noticed, because Magneto sort of mimicked the abilities that Zorn had, and he was masked. But then he was unmasked, and haha, with the help of Chinese supporters, it was Magneto the whole time, and he wasn't dead, and he did all this, pretended to be a teacher for months because he wanted to infiltrate the X-Men. So yeah, this was clearly a reveal to be a reveal, and then they had to retcon it away, and it doesn't even make sense how they did it. Just why? Unpopular opinion, I think this entire run by Grant Morrison is overrated. Leave your unpopular opinions down below. I can see them now. You're overrated. You move your hands too much. Number 1. Big Barda and Superman are kidnapped to make a porno. So for this we need to go back to Action Comics number 592, and in this story, poor Barda, who is just adjusting to her life on Earth, tries to stop a crime, only to end up in the sewers and kidnapped by a villain called the Sleaze, who lives up to his name and then some. He can control people's emotions and force them to do his bidding, and his plan at first is just to make her dance for him. But by happenstance, Superman ends up tracking Sleaze to the sewers, and then they both end up under his control, and his next plan is to take them to a pornographer to shoot an official porn movie for the money. The worst part, they're both fighting it the entire time, but can't. Thankfully, they're saved by Barda's husband, Mr. Miracle, and all they've done is kiss. Okay, this plan, it makes sense, it's just really gross and icky. It's not even a bad story, it just leaves you feeling like you need several showers. It's a super petty, weak plan. I mean, Sleaze, you were from Apocalypse, and this is the best you got? Actually, I'm kinda glad. If this was the B plan, I don't wanna see the A plan. It's probably like a superhero orgy or something.